I never thought snow removal would turn me into the neighborhood's most wanted man. But here we are, standing in front of a judge while Brenda Patterson from the HOA insists I committed criminal negligence by refusing to shovel her driveway. My name is Jacob Emerson, and I moved to Meadowbrook Commons in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota, 3 years ago. The townhouse complex seemed perfect when I bought in, a modest 2-bedroom unit with a small patio and access to the community amenities. The HOA fees were reasonable at $200 a month, and the property manager seemed competent during our initial meeting. I worked from home as a software developer, so the quiet neighborhood felt ideal for my lifestyle. The first 2 winters passed without incident. Snow fell, the contracted plow service cleared the parking lots and main walkways, and everyone went about their business. Everything changed last October when the HOA board held elections. Brenda Patterson, a 47-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative with too much time on her hands, won the presidency by default. Only 12 people out of 84 units bothered to vote, and Brenda ran unopposed after the previous president moved to Florida. I should have seen the warning signs when she immediately started sending lengthy emails about community standards and maximizing property values before Thanksgiving even arrived. The first real snow of the season hit Minneapolis on November 15th. We got 6 inches overnight, and I woke up to find the parking lot plowed but the sidewalks still buried. Not unusual, as the plow service typically came back later in the morning to handle walkways. I made coffee, settled into my home office, and started working on a client's database migration project. Around 10 in the morning, my doorbell rang. I saved my work and headed downstairs, opening the door to find Brenda standing on my stoop with a clipboard pressed against her chest. She wore a puffy purple jacket and had her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it made her eyes look perpetually surprised. "Good morning, Jacob," she said with forced cheerfulness. "I wanted to personally deliver this to you." She thrust a laminated card at me. I took it, confused, and read the heading. Meadowbrook Commons Snow Removal Volunteer Schedule. Volunteer schedule, I asked. Yes, the board voted last week to implement a new cost-saving measure. We are terminating our contract with Arctic Snow Services and transitioning to a resident-based snow removal system. Each unit will be responsible for clearing designated sections of the community walkways after snowfall events. I stared at her. "You are saying residents have to shovel the sidewalks now, community walkways," Brenda corrected, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "The parking lot will still be handled by a plow service, but the walkways, courtyards, and recreational areas will be maintained by residents. It is all in the amended bylaws we sent out last week." I vaguely remembered an email with a massive PDF attachment that I had skimmed but not read thoroughly. Work had been intense, and I assumed it was the usual HOA minutiae about pool hours and landscaping schedules. "Brenda, I work full-time from home. I do not have time to shovel community walkways." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "According to the bylaws, all residents must participate in community maintenance activities when designated by the board. You are assigned to Section C, which includes the walkways from Building 4 to the mailbox cluster and around the tot lot, approximately 400 linear feet. 400 feet. That is insane. What about the elderly residents? What about people with disabilities? Accommodations can be requested in writing and will be reviewed by the board on a case-by-case basis," she recited as if reading from a script. "Failure to complete assigned snow removal duties within 4 hours of snowfall cessation will result in fines of $50 per occurrence." I felt heat rising in my chest. This is ridiculous. We pay HOA fees for this exact reason. We pay HOA fees for many things, Jacob. The board determined that our reserve fund needed bolstering, and eliminating the snow removal contract saves us approximately $8,000 per season. That money will go toward repaving the parking lot in the spring. So you expect residents to do manual labor to save money? Brenda's fake smile disappeared. I expect residents to contribute to their community instead of sitting in their homes all day expecting others to do everything for them. Your first assignment is to clear Section C by 2 p.m. today. I will be conducting inspections. She turned and walked away before I could respond, her boots crunching through the snow she expected me to clear. I stood in the doorway, cold air rushing in, staring at the laminated schedule. My name appeared 4 times over the next 2 weeks. I called my neighbor Marcus Thompson, who lived 3 units down. Marcus was a high school teacher in his mid-30s who had been in the complex longer than me. "Did you get one of these schedule cards?" I asked when he answered. "Yeah, man. Brenda showed up here at 8 this morning. I told her I have to be at school by 7:15 every day. She said I could shovel before I leave or after I get home, like I want to shovel snow in the dark after teaching teenagers all day. This cannot be legal." "I already looked into it," Marcus said, and I heard frustration in his voice. "Minnesota HOA law gives boards pretty broad authority over common areas. Unless the bylaws explicitly prohibit forced labor, which ours do not, they can technically require residents to perform maintenance. But we pay for maintenance in our fees." "Right, but the fees do not legally obligate them to hire professionals. They can use the money however they vote to use it." I talked to a real estate attorney friend, and she said our only recourse is to vote out the board or challenge the bylaw amendment at the next general meeting. "When is that?" "Not until March." I hung up feeling defeated. I looked outside at Section C, which was indeed buried under 6 inches of heavy, wet snow. I did not even own a proper snow shovel, just a small plastic one I used for my patio. I checked my watch. Noon already. 2 hours to clear 400 feet or face a $50 fine. I put on my coat and boots, grabbed my inadequate shovel, and trudged outside. The temperature hovered around 28 degrees, and the sun kept disappearing behind gray clouds. I started near Building 4, pushing the little shovel into snow that immediately proved too heavy for it. Within 10 minutes, I was sweating despite the cold, and I had cleared maybe 15 feet. This was going to take hours. I worked steadily, falling into a mindless rhythm. Push, lift, throw. Push, lift, throw. My back started complaining after 30 minutes. My shoulders burned after 45. I passed other residents doing the same thing, all of us looking equally miserable. An older woman named Dorothy Chen was struggling with the walkway near her unit, moving so slowly I worried she would hurt herself. "Dorothy, let me help you," I said, abandoning Section C temporarily. "Oh, Jacob, you are sweet, but I cannot let you fall behind on your own section. Brenda already came by and told me I better keep moving." I helped her anyway, clearing her 30-foot section in about 10 minutes while she rested on her walker. She thanked me with tears in her eyes, which made me even angrier at Brenda and this whole stupid system. By the time I finished Section C, it was 3:15. I had missed the deadline. I also missed a client call at 2:30 because I was outside doing manual labor instead of my actual job. My back ached, my hands were raw despite gloves, and I was exhausted. Brenda appeared as I was putting away my shovel, walking along the cleared path with her clipboard. "Jacob, you missed the 2 p.m. deadline by over an hour. That is a $50 fine." I was helping Dorothy Chen. "Each resident is responsible for their own assigned section. Helping others does not excuse you from punctuality requirements. Brenda, this is unreasonable. I had to miss a work call because of this. Then perhaps you should manage your time more efficiently. She made a note on her clipboard. The fine will appear on next month's HOA statement. Also, we are expecting another snow system on Wednesday. You are scheduled for Section F that day. I trust you will be more punctual. She walked away, and I stood there fantasizing about throwing a snowball at the back of her head. I did not, obviously. Instead, I went inside, took a hot shower, and sent an apologetic email to my client explaining I had a home emergency. Wednesday brought 8 inches of new snow and an early morning text from Brenda. Remember your Section F assignment. Completion deadline is noon due to the increased accumulation. I looked at the clock. 7 a.m. I had a team meeting at 9 that I could not miss. Section F included the entire courtyard area and the walkways connecting buildings 6 and 7. Easily 600 feet of sidewalk, plus a large open area. I went outside at 7:30 with the same inadequate shovel and started working. The snow was lighter and fluffier this time, which helped, but the quantity was overwhelming. Other residents were already out, everyone racing against Brenda's arbitrary deadlines. I saw Marcus shoveling his section in his teaching clothes, looking furious. My 9 a.m. meeting came and went while I was still shoveling. I had my phone in my pocket and felt it buzzing repeatedly. I kept working, knowing I had no choice unless I wanted another $50 fine. My project manager called at 9:30. I answered, breathless. Jacob, where are you? We needed your input on the API integration. I am sorry, Tim. HOA emergency. Our HOA is making residents shovel snow and there are fines if we do not finish by noon. You are kidding. I wish I was. Can you dial in while you work? I looked at my snow-covered phone, my numbing fingers, the hundreds of feet still ahead of me. No, not really possible. I will catch up this afternoon. Tim was not happy, but what could I do? I worked for a contracting firm that valued results, and missing meetings was not acceptable. But neither were $100 fines for not shoveling snow. I finished Section F at 12:40, 40 minutes late. I was exhausted, freezing despite the exertion and dreading the inevitable visit from Brenda. She showed up at 1 p.m. Another missed deadline, Jacob. Another $50 fine. Brenda, I am trying to work a full-time job here. This is interfering with my livelihood. Many residents work full-time. They manage to fulfill their community obligations. Perhaps you need to wake up earlier. Earlier than 7:30, if that is what it takes. She made her clipboard notation. We have another storm forecasted for Saturday. You are assigned to Section B. 6 a.m. deadline. 6 a.m. That is insane. The Weather Service predicts heavy snowfall beginning Friday night. We need walkways clear for residents who have weekend commitments. 6 a.m. Jacob, do not be late again. That night, I drafted a formal complaint letter to the HOA board. I outlined how the snow removal policy was interfering with residents' work obligations, creating hardship for elderly and disabled residents, and generating unnecessary conflict within the community. I sent copies to all 7 board members and posted it on the community Facebook group. The response from Brenda came within an hour via email. Your concerns have been noted and will be discussed at the next board meeting in December. In the meantime, all residents are expected to comply with current bylaws. Failure to comply will result in continued fines and potential legal action. The Facebook post generated more response. Dozens of residents commented in agreement. Marcus shared his own frustrations. Dorothy Chen wrote about how she was terrified of falling on ice while shoveling. Others pointed out that the previous snow removal service had been perfectly adequate. and the cost savings were minimal compared to the hardship imposed. But a few residents defended Brenda. Patricia Novak, a retired nurse who served as HOA treasurer, commented, "Building community means contributing to community. We all need to do our part instead of complaining." Another board member, Dennis Clark, wrote, "The board voted unanimously on this measure. It is democratic and fair." Saturday morning arrived with 12 inches of fresh snow and a 6 a.m. deadline for Section B. I set my alarm for 4:30, dragged myself out of bed in the dark, and went outside with a headlamp strapped to my forehead. The snow was still falling. The temperature was 19 degrees. I could barely see through the blowing snow. I started shoveling Section B, which covered the walkways around the community center and the pool area. The snow was heavy and wet again, made worse by the wind. My back protested immediately, still sore from Wednesday's marathon session. I pushed through, determined not to give Brenda another reason to find me. Other residents were out there too, all of us looking like Antarctic explorers trudging through a blizzard. I saw Marcus again, shoveling in silence. I saw Dorothy Chen's daughter Melissa doing her mother's section after Dorothy had finally submitted a medical exemption request. Around 5:30, the snow stopped. I still had about 100 feet to go. My hands were numb, my face was frozen, and I was fairly certain I had frostbite starting on my left ear. I pushed harder, racing the clock. I finished at 5:58, 2 minutes to spare. I stood there in the dark, steam rising off my body, every muscle screaming. I waited, knowing Brenda would appear even though it was barely dawn on a Saturday morning. Sure enough, at 6:15, her SUV pulled into the parking lot. She got out wearing a luxurious fur-lined parka, holding her clipboard and a flashlight even though the sun was starting to rise. She walked the entire length of Section B, inspecting my work with the flashlight. I watched from my patio, drinking coffee with shaking hands. She stopped at one spot, crouched down, and measured something with a small ruler. Oh no! She walked to my door and knocked. I opened it. "Jacob, Section B7 near the pool gate has an accumulation of approximately 2 inches of snow remaining. The bylaws require all walkways to be cleared to bare pavement. This is insufficient and constitutes a failed inspection. $50 fine." I stared at her in disbelief. I was out there for 90 minutes in a blizzard. That section must have gotten covered again by blowing snow after I finished it. Then you should have accounted for drifting conditions and re-cleared it before the deadline. Something inside me snapped. "No." Brenda blinked. "Excuse me." "No, I am not paying that fine. This is harassment, Brenda. You are fining people for not achieving perfection in impossible conditions. You are standing there in your expensive coat judging work you have never done yourself. I am HOA president. I do not need to participate in resident assignments. Why not? You live here too. Board members are exempt from volunteer duties due to their administrative responsibilities. How convenient. I felt years of customer service professionalism falling away, replaced by pure frustration. "You know what, Brenda? I am done. I quit." "You cannot quit. You live here." "I can quit volunteering for your forced labor program. Fine me all you want. I am not shoveling another foot of snow for this HOA. Her face turned red. "If you refuse to fulfill your obligations, the fines will continue to accumulate. We can place a lien on your property." "Then place a lien. I will see you in court." I closed the door in her face and stood there shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. I had never done anything like that before. I generally avoided confrontation, preferring to follow rules and keep peace. But something about freezing in the dark for 90 minutes only to be measured with a ruler had broken something fundamental in my compliance mechanism. My phone buzzed within 10 minutes. An email from the HOA board. Notice of violation and fine schedule. Resident Jacob Emerson of Unit 47B has refused to comply with mandatory snow removal assignments. Effective immediately, non-compliance fines of $50 per assigned section will be assessed. Additionally, a daily fine of $25 will be charged until compliance is achieved. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called immediately. Dude, they cannot do that. Daily fines. That is punitive. Apparently, they can do whatever Brenda wants. I am about to join you in quitting. I am exhausted. Half my students commented yesterday about how tired I looked. Do it. Everyone should quit. Let Brenda and her board cronies shovel the walkways themselves. I am in. Let me send some messages. Marcus started a group chat with everyone who had complained on Facebook. Within hours, a dozen residents had agreed to stop participating in snow removal. We called ourselves the Snowfall Resistance, which made us laugh despite the situation. Brenda responded by hiring a law firm to send cease and desist letters threatening legal action for breach of HOA contract. I responded by hiring my own attorney, a sharp woman named Linda Cordova who specialized in HOA disputes. This is one of the more ridiculous cases I have seen, Linda said during our initial consultation at her office in downtown Minneapolis. Forced volunteer labor is legally questionable, but the real issue is the punitive fine structure. Daily fines require specific bylaw language, and from what I am reading in your documents, that language does not exist. So they cannot actually fine me $25 a day. They can try, but it would not hold up in court. However, they can fine you for each missed assignment, which adds up quickly. The bigger problem is if they place a lien on your property. That affects your ability to sell or refinance. What are my options? Option 1, pay the fines and comply. Option 2, fight the bylaw amendment as improperly enacted. Option 3, force a special election to recall the board. Option 4, sue the HOA for harassment and seek injunctive relief. What do you recommend? Linda leaned back in her chair, considering. Honestly, I recommend organizing the other residents and going nuclear. This Brenda person is creating a hostile living environment, and the law recognizes that HOA boards have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of all residents. If you can demonstrate that this policy is harmful, expensive, and poorly implemented, you can get it overturned. How do we do that? Document everything. Every hour spent shoveling, every missed work obligation, every injury or near injury. Get statements from elderly residents who feel unsafe. Track the actual cost of the policy versus the claimed savings. Build a case that this is not about saving money, but about Brenda exercising power. I left Linda's office feeling energized. I spent the evening creating a shared spreadsheet where resistance members could log their hours, missed obligations, and expenses related to snow removal. The data started pouring in. Marcus had missed 3 days of classes to shovel snow. Dorothy Chen's daughter had taken time off work twice to help her mother. A single mother named Rachel Foster had to pay for emergency childcare because she could not supervise her kids while shoveling. A software engineer named Kevin Park had lost a freelance contract because he missed too many deadlines. The more we documented, the clearer it became that Brenda's cost-saving measure was actually costing residents thousands of dollars in lost wages and additional expenses. The next snowfall hit on December 7th, 8 inches overnight. The resistance members, now numbering 23 residents, did nothing. We watched through our windows as snow piled up on walkways. We posted photos in our group, Chat with captions like "looking beautiful out there" and "nature's white carpet." Brenda responded by hiring an emergency snow removal service to clear the walkways at a cost of $600, then dividing the cost among the resistance members as a special assessment. She sent an email. Residents who refuse to fulfill their obligations have been charged for emergency snow removal. This amount is due immediately and is in addition to existing fines. Linda filed an injunction request the same day, arguing that the HOA could not charge residents for services they were simultaneously requiring residents to provide themselves. The court scheduled a hearing for December 20th. In the meantime, it kept snowing. Minneapolis was having one of its snowiest Decembers in years. Storm after storm rolled through, each one dumping 6 to 12 inches. The parking lot plow service kept the roads clear, but the walkways became a battlefield. Brenda assigned all snow removal duties to the remaining 61 residents who had not joined the resistance. Their sections doubled, then tripled. I watched a middle-aged accountant named Philip Torres spend 4 hours clearing walkways on December 10th, finishing after dark with a flashlight. He joined the resistance the next day. More residents followed. By mid-December, 41 residents had stopped complying. The community walkways stayed snow-covered for days at a time. Brenda hired the emergency service twice more, racking up charges she tried to assess against resistance members. The December 20th court hearing took place in a packed courtroom. Linda presented our documentation. Over 900 combined hours spent shoveling, 17 missed workdays, 1 sprained ankle, 2 cases of frostbite, and estimated lost wages exceeding $34,000. Brenda's attorney, a tired-looking man named Robert Fletcher, argued that residents had contractually agreed to follow HOA bylaws, and the snow removal policy was properly enacted through a board vote. Judge Amanda Richardson, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened to both sides before asking, "Mr. Fletcher, was there a quorum present at the board meeting where this policy was enacted?" Fletcher shuffled papers. "The meeting was properly noticed and conducted according to the bylaws." "That was not my question. Was there a quorum?" More paper shuffling. "The bylaws allow the board to conduct business with 4 members present. And how many were present?" 4 members, Your Honor. "Out of 7 total?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Richardson turned to Brenda, who sat next to her attorney looking confident. "Miss Patterson, are you the HOA president?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you participate in the vote to enact this snow removal policy?" "Yes, I voted in favor." "You perform snow removal duties yourself?" Brenda hesitated. "Board members are exempt from volunteer duties." "Who decided that?" "The board voted on it." "Did you participate in that vote as well?" "Yes." Judge Richardson's expression hardened. "So you voted to require residents to perform manual labor, then voted to exempt yourself from that same labor. It is necessary for board members to focus on administrative duties." "I see." The judge made notes. "Miss Patterson, how much time do you spend per week on administrative duties for this HOA?" Brenda shifted in her seat. "It varies. Several hours at least." "Several. Could you be more specific?" "Perhaps 5 or 6 hours per week." "And you work full-time outside the HOA?" "Yes, in pharmaceutical sales." "So you have time for full-time work and 5 hours of HOA administration. But residents who work full-time cannot have time for both their jobs and snow removal," Fletcher interjected. "Your Honor, the efficiency of individual time management is not the issue here." "Actually, counsel, I think it is exactly the issue. You are asking this court to enforce a policy that creates financial hardship for residents while the board members who enacted it exempt themselves from compliance. That seems like a textbook case of arbitrary and capricious governance. I felt hope rising in my chest. Judge Richardson continued. Additionally, the bylaws provided to this court do not contain language authorizing daily accumulating fines. Miss Patterson, on what authority did you assess $25 daily fines against Mr. Emerson? Brenda looked at Fletcher, who stood up. Your Honor, the board has broad discretion to establish fine structures for violations. Show me the bylaw provision that grants that discretion. Fletcher flipped through the bylaw book. Article 7, Section 3 states that the board may assess reasonable fines for violations. Reasonable fines. Do you believe $25 per day, accumulating indefinitely, is reasonable? In the context of willful non-compliance, yes. Mr. Emerson was complying until he decided the policy was unreasonable and made himself sick shoveling snow at 4:30 in the morning. That is not willful non-compliance. That is a resident pushed past reasonable limits. Judge Richardson closed her folder. Here is my ruling. The HOA's snow removal policy is not void, as it was enacted through a proper board vote. However, the exemption for board members creates an unequal application that violates the HOA's duty of fair treatment. Effective immediately, board members must participate in snow removal assignments identical to those of regular residents. Second, the daily accumulating fines are not authorized by the bylaws and are hereby voided. Third, special assessments for emergency snow removal cannot be charged exclusively to non-compliant residents. If the HOA chooses to hire a service, the cost must be distributed equally among all units. Finally, I am ordering a special election to be held within 60 days so residents can vote on whether to retain this policy. The courtroom erupted. Resistance members cheered. Brenda looked like she had been slapped. Fletcher tried to argue, but the judge was done. My ruling is final, counsel. Court is adjourned. We celebrated at Marcus's place that night. 19 of us crammed into his living room with pizza and beer. We toasted Linda, who had worked for a reduced rate because she believed in the case. We toasted each other for standing up to Brenda's tyranny. This is not over, Marcus warned. We still have to win the special election. And Brenda still has to shovel snow now, I added, grinning. I cannot wait to see that. The next snowfall came on December 23rd, 6 inches of heavy, wet snow on the day before Christmas Eve. The court order was already in effect. Brenda was assigned to Section E, a particularly long stretch from Building 3 to the community center. I made fresh coffee and stood at my window, watching. Brenda emerged at 8 a.m. with a cheap plastic shovel similar to my original inadequate tool. She wore designer snow gear that looked purchased yesterday. She started shoveling tentatively, clearly unfamiliar with the proper technique. Other board members were out too. Dennis Clark struggled with Section H. Patricia Novak moved slowly through Section A. The remaining 3 board members, all of whom had barely participated in board business, quit the board entirely rather than shovel snow. Brenda kept working, moving slowly. Other residents watched from their windows. Some went out and deliberately walked across her cleared sections, tracking new snow onto the pavement. Petty. Yes, satisfying. Absolutely. Around 10 a.m. Brenda stopped, leaning on her shovel. She had cleared maybe a quarter of Section E. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Within 30 minutes, a pickup truck arrived and 2 young guys got out with professional shovels. They finished Section E in 20 minutes while Brenda watched. Marcus called me. Did she just hire someone to do her assignment? Looks like it. That is cheating. Technically, the bylaws do not prohibit hiring someone to fulfill your assignment. Then we should all do that. and defeat the purpose of the cost-saving measure. Brenda would love that. The special election was scheduled for February 8th. In the meantime, the board meetings became must-see TV. The January meeting attracted 72 residents, the most attendance in the community's history. People were angry. Why are board members hiring services while residents are fined for not shoveling? Demanded Rachel Foster. Brenda, looking exhausted, responded, "There is no bylaw against hiring someone to complete your assigned section. So only people who can afford to hire help can avoid this insane policy. Residents can organize among themselves, trade sections, or offer compensation to others who complete their work. The policy allows for flexibility." "Then why were we fined for not participating?" I asked from the back of the room. "Because you outright refused rather than finding alternative solutions." "Alternative solutions like being wealthy enough to hire people. That is not flexibility, Brenda. That is classism." The room erupted in agreement. Brenda banged her gavel uselessly. The meeting dissolved into chaos. After that disaster, Brenda tried a different approach. She scheduled a meeting with resistance leaders, including Marcus, Rachel, and me. We met in the community center on January 15th. "Let me be direct," Brenda said, skipping pleasantries. "This has gotten out of hand. I genuinely believed the snow removal policy would build community and save money. Clearly, it has not worked as intended." "No kidding," Marcus said. "I am willing to negotiate. If you convince your group to drop the push for a special election, I will recommend that the board reinstate professional snow removal services." I shook my head. "That is not enough, Brenda. You have fined people hundreds of dollars. You have created months of conflict and hardship. You have cost people jobs and income. I can have the fines waived. What about the lost wages, the medical expenses from injuries, the child care costs?" Brenda sighed. "The HOA does not have funds to compensate for those things." "Then you personally should compensate people. You pushed this policy through knowing it would create hardship. That is not fair. I was acting in my capacity as HOA president." "You were acting like a tyrant," Rachel said quietly. "You exempted yourself from the rules you imposed on others. You fined people for not meeting impossible standards. You ignored complaints and pushed forward with something that hurt people." Brenda's eyes got watery. "I was trying to help the community. The reserve fund is underfunded. We have major repairs coming up. I thought this was a solution." "Then you should have built consensus first," I said. "You should have surveyed residents, considered alternatives, and implemented it gradually with opt-outs for hardship cases. Instead, you rammed it through and became a dictator." The meeting ended without resolution. The special election went forward as scheduled. The vote was simple. Should Meadowbrook Commons reinstate professional snow removal services? Yes or no? The HOA hired an independent election company to handle ballots and counting. Voting took place over 3 days in early February, with both paper ballots and electronic options available. 78 of 84 units voted, a historic turnout. The result was 74 votes for yes, 4 votes for no. Professional snow removal was reinstated immediately. Arctic Snow Services returned with their plows and equipment. Residents went back to their normal lives. The February blizzard that dumped 14 inches on Minneapolis got cleared by professionals while I worked from my warm home office. But there was still the matter of the fines and costs. Linda Cordova filed a class action lawsuit against the HOA on behalf of 47 residents seeking compensation for lost wages, medical expenses, and emotional distress. The damages totaled $87,000. The HOA's insurance company reviewed the case and determined that Brenda had acted outside the scope of reasonable board authority, meaning her actions were not covered by the HOA's director and officer liability policy. She was personally liable. Brenda's attorney tried to negotiate a settlement, but Linda was relentless. "Your client caused real harm to real people. They deserve compensation." The case went to mediation in March. After 8 hours of negotiations, we reached a settlement. Brenda would pay $45,000 from her personal funds, the HOA would pay $30,000 from reserves, and the insurance company would contribute $12,000. All fines would be voided and refunded. Additionally, Brenda agreed to resign from the board and was prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership role for 5 years. The settlement checks arrived in April. I received $900, covering my missed work time and the medical costs for treating the frostbite on my ear. Others received more, particularly those who had suffered injuries or lost significant income. Brenda moved out of Meadowbrook Commons in May. I heard she bought a condo in a building with no HOA, just a property management company that handled everything. I could not blame her, honestly. The HOA elected a new board in June. Marcus became president. One of his first actions was to create a resident advisory committee to review any major policy changes before they went to a vote. No more surprises. No more unilateral decisions. The snow removal contract with Arctic Snow Services was renewed for 3 years at a slightly higher rate than before, but still reasonable. The reserve fund issue was addressed through a modest special assessment spread over 2 years, which residents voted to approve after proper discussion and transparency about the need. I think about that winter sometimes, usually when snow starts falling and I am sitting comfortably inside while professionals clear the walkways. I think about how close we came to just accepting Brenda's policy, paying the fines, and suffering in silence. I think about what would have happened if no one had said no. Power, unchecked, grows into tyranny, even in something as mundane as a homeowners association. Brenda probably did start with good intentions, wanting to save money and build community. But somewhere along the way, she became more concerned with enforcing compliance than considering whether her rules made sense. The whole experience taught me that community is not built through forced labor or punishment. It is built through mutual respect, reasonable expectations, and leaders who are willing to do what they ask of others. Brenda wanted community but created resentment instead. She wanted compliance but generated resistance. Marcus and I still live at Meadowbrook Commons. Dorothy Chen is still here too, now with a formal mobility accommodation that ensures the walkway to her unit gets cleared first. Rachel Foster serves on the advisory committee. Philip Torres joined the board as treasurer and implemented transparent financial reporting so everyone can see where their fees go. The community is actually stronger now than before the snow removal disaster. We know each other better. We show up to meetings because we learned that participation matters. We hold leaders accountable because we experienced what happens when we do not. Sometimes I see the spot where Brenda measured my snow clearance with a ruler, and I laugh. It seems so absurd now, that moment of bureaucratic petness that sparked months of conflict. But at the time, it was genuinely oppressive, a symbol of arbitrary authority run amok. The last chapter of the story came in September when I received a letter forwarded from my attorney. It was from Brenda, handwritten on nice stationery. "Dear Jacob," it began. "I have spent the past several months reflecting on my time as HOA president and the snow removal situation specifically. I want to apologize. I was wrong to implement that policy the way I did. I was wrong to exempt board members from participation. I was wrong to ignore the hardship it caused and to double down instead of listening. I let my ego and my desire to fix the budget override my judgment and my empathy. I know this apology does not undo the harm I caused, but I hope you can accept it as genuine. I learned a hard lesson about leadership and power, one I should have learned earlier in life. I hope Meadowbrook Commons is thriving without me. Sincerely, Brenda Patterson. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I appreciated the apology, even though it did not change what happened. Growth requires acknowledging mistakes, and Brenda had at least done that. I replied with a brief note. Brenda, thank you for the apology. I accept it. I hope you are doing well in your new home. The community is indeed thriving, partly because of lessons we learned during that difficult winter. Take care, Jacob. And that was that. No dramatic final confrontation, no courtroom showdown with criminal charges. Just a misguided HOA president who overstepped, a community that pushed back, and a resolution that made things right without destroying anyone's life. Well, except for the $45,000 Brenda had to pay, which was significant. But she had caused $87,000 in damages, so the reduced settlement was actually generous. Life at Meadowbrook Commons is peaceful now. The snow falls every winter, and professionals clear it efficiently. Marcus runs board meetings with humor and transparency. Residents actually enjoy the occasional community events because they are voluntary and fun, not mandatory labor. I still work from home, still developing software for clients, still enjoying my quiet townhouse with the small patio. The difference is that now I know my neighbors better. I know Marcus not just as the guy 3 units down, but as a friend and a trustworthy leader. I know Rachel as someone who will fight for what is right. I know Dorothy and her daughter Melissa, Philip Torres, Kevin Park, and dozens of others. Brenda wanted to build community through forced snow shoveling. She failed. But ironically, her failure brought us together in ways her success never would have. We built solidarity through resistance. We built relationships through shared struggle. We built trust by standing together against unreasonable authority. So in a weird way, maybe I should thank Brenda, not for the policy itself, which was genuinely terrible, but for inadvertently creating the conditions that forged a real community out of what had been just a collection of people who happened to live near each other. The snow falls. The plows clear it. Life goes on. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right and snow drifts across the walkways, I remember that winter and smile. I remember saying no. I remember closing the door in Brenda's face. I remember standing with neighbors who became friends. I remember that ordinary people can resist unreasonable authority, even in something as mundane as a suburban HOA. We do not have to accept every rule handed down from above. We can question, we can organize, we can fight back, and sometimes we win. The community garden project that broke ground last month has a plaque near the entrance. Marcus insisted on it. The plaque reads, Meadowbrook Commons Community Garden established 2026, built through collaboration, maintained through mutual respect, enjoyed by all. A reminder that community grows from care, not coercion. I helped plant the first tomatoes last week. So did Rachel, Philip, Dorothy's daughter Melissa, and about 15 other residents. We worked together because we wanted to, not because anyone forced us. We laughed, shared gardening tips, and made plans for a harvest party in August. That is what community looks like. Not Brenda's forced labor and punitive fines. Not mandatory volunteer schedules and ruler measurements. Just people choosing to contribute because they want their neighborhood to be better. The snow will fall again next November. The professionals will clear it. And I will watch from my warm office, coffee in hand, grateful for the lesson that winter taught me. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your community is refuse to participate in something that harms it. Sometimes saying no is the most powerful form of community building there is. The walkways stay clear now, maintained by people paid fairly to do the work. The residents stay warm, focusing on their jobs and families and lives. The HOA board serves with humility, knowing they are accountable to everyone. And somewhere in a condo without an HOA, Brenda hopefully learned that leadership is not about power over people. It is about empowering people to thrive. I never thought I would become the guy who stood up to an HOA president. I was always the rule follower, the conflict avoider, the person who just wanted to keep his head down and live his life. But sometimes circumstances demand more from us. Sometimes we have to be more than we think we are. That winter made me more than I was. It made all of us more. And for that, despite everything, I am grateful. The snow falls. The community endures, and we remember the winter we learned to say no.